Welcome to the Mile High podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles, and I'm coming to you from an altitude of 5,280 feet, Mile High country, where we look forward to seeing you in just about 30 days. And I am super thrilled that you're also going to get to see Stew Bittman, who we are interviewing right now on Mile High stage and on this podcast right now. Wherever you're watching or listening, whether it be on iTunes or Google, YouTube, Facebook, I highly recommend that you hit subscribe so you are always in on Mile High Tech. And Dr. Stew Bittman, you are somewhat of a legend in the chiropractic realm. I hear your name so frequently, and people give such rave feedback for, I will say this, what a special soul you are, and in terms of servant to the profession and to humanity. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Oh, well, gosh, thank you for that. This made my day.
Hey,
I have a question though. Are there any young people who are legends?
There could be.
Okay, it just seems
I mean,
to come
isn't there the legend of Josie Wales?
Okay, so you either have to be old or shoot people.
Something like that, or die young.
I get the criteria now.
Or die young. Probably.
Or die young. Yeah. So yep. I prefer to be old.
I'd rather be a legend and old and die old. So, and on that note, tell us a little bit so people get to know you a little bit better about your chiropractic journey. How did you find yourself in the world of chiropractic?
Oh gosh, very mundanely through injuring my back and, and meeting a chiropractor because I was working in a casino in the slot department, and my wife was dealing poker, and there was a regular player on her game that was a chiropractor, famous in Tahoe as Doc, known as Doc. Anyway, not a great poker player, but a pretty good chiropractor. And I started seeing him, and I had a biology background and stuff, so it sounded intriguing to me, and that's what launched me. It wasn't a great story, but I graduated from LACC, or what it was called at the time, as the valedictorian. So I learned everything they got to teach me. Unfortunately, I knew nothing about chiropractic, could barely spell chiropractic, as Sigafoose used to say. And wasn't until a few years later that I was exposed to the philosophy at Parker seminars, actually, by Sigafoose and others. And after the first time I heard Sigafoose and walked out of the room kind of upset, a year later he became my hero and later my mentor. And
isn't that funny how that happens?
Yeah, it's funny because the same thing happened to him. First time he heard Sid Williams speak, apparently he walked out of the room really upset too. So sometimes we're just not ready.
Yes. Well,
either that or he changed every single word he said the following year when I heard him. But I doubt that.
I tend to say that people are either crock pots or pressure cookers. I mean, crock pots or microwaves, right? So they'll either they'll get to the principle really quickly, or they may simmer for a while.
Well, I caught it pretty quickly once I was exposed to it and heard it, and I just had always had just an emptiness, a feeling that everything I learned was not quite it. Something huge was missing for me, and that filled that gap. And so I did run with that, and I did a bunch of Panama or missions around the world, and started going to Sigafoose's a gathering, his personal development workshop. Did a lot of work on myself, and then I started teaching there at the gathering and speaking alongside him and traveling to Europe. And that's kind of why I've kept a bit of a low profile in the United States. I started off speaking at Parker, but most of my speaking career has been overseas. So it's been a goal of mine to be more of a prophet in my hometown, so to speak. And so I am super chuffed. I even use British expressions. Chuffed means excited. To be speaking at Mile High, to me, the seminar in the United States. And so As you
Wow.
know,
Well, I'm honored hearing that from you. That means a lot to me. So I appreciate it. We put a lot of energy into it, and we really want to have Mile High be central in the country, in the center of the principle, and people know what they get there in terms of we really have to uplift the principle in terms of what people are exposed to in school and education, and even in chiropractic offices, sadly. So tell us about your practice, your years in practice. You don't practice now, do you? Am I remembering correctly?
you are correct. I
Okay.
practiced for 24 years. And so I sold my practice about 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And well, through that time, the first few years were, I don't even know what I was doing. Spending a lot of time with people and a lot of therapy. I had the stuff I learned at LACC.
Mm-hmm.
I was an acute diagnostician and an even better referrer.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we learned to do.
For some kind of ology to an ologist.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I ended up being, doing the box on the wall for the last 12 years, spending, a couple of minutes, mostly upper cervical. So I kind of ran the gamut, I would say, or the spectrum
Mm-hmm.
within chiropractic. And I kind of liked it better, a lot where I ended up than where I started. So,
and why is that? What was it different about the experience?
well, I mean, a lot of things, but maybe the main thing is it became, instead of an adjustment being something I did to somebody, it became something I did with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It became more of an act of love. It became, and that in turn helped me to be a lot more present and a lot more on purpose, and saw a lot more people, which helps with all of those things too.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously started to see much more exciting things happen when I wasn't limiting it with my own belief system about what was possible and buying into people's ideas of what they said they wanted and needed, which later on I kind of completely ignored.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hope you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. I do know what you mean.
I didn't ignore it. I acknowledged it, and people need to be heard, but I didn't use it. I didn't base what I did on it, and I would explain that to people, and apparently that was okay with them.
Yes. I remember I did my externship with Peter Kevorkian, who you probably know, familiar with him, way back 22 years ago or something, or 23 years ago. And he said something to one of his practice members in front of me, and I heard him say it a handful of times, because the person was pointing out, I'm here and this and that. And he just said, thank you for telling me. And what you said doesn't direct any of what I do, but I want to make sure you feel heard. There's a very big difference in that.
And I think most of the time that's really what people need, is
right.
to be heard. They don't,
exactly.
I don't even, and later on people would still do it, even though they knew I wasn't going to base anything on it. And that was okay, because they still needed to be, needed to be heard. And
exactly.
Yeah. And then, so that was really good, because I stopped taking that as a sign that, they don't get it.
Right.
Which is an expression that I don't really like in chiropractic.
Right. Or that it becomes that you have to be adversarial about, don't tell me. I mean, people,
right.
There, and by the way, there's information being, or you tell me, do you feel that there's information that they're sharing that lets you know a little bit about them, who they are, where they are in their healing process, that's not about treating the condition or treating the complaint?
Yeah, and it's not about questioning the principle or questioning you or me in that case. And that took a bit to overcome, because chiropractors are very sensitive souls.
Right.
and I think I told you my favorite quote is, it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. That's from Mark Twain. I love that quote. And to me, it applies completely here. It's because that's one of the things that I used to know for sure, that people didn't get it. And that was why they left, or that was why they didn't start it. Either that, or it was my fault Either way, it wasn't very empowering and not even true.
Right.
I lost a patient. A patient stopped seeing me one time. I was only to find out because she was good friends with my CA. She was one of these people who, for the first 2 weeks are ready to give you their firstborn, and they're just like super excited. And I started to get leery about those people because sometimes when the honeymoon period was over. Anyway, she disappeared, and I was to find out the reason is she, after her 4th or 5th adjustment, she got a period, which was interesting because she had had a hysterectomy like 8 years prior. And so she told her friend, my CA, that this is a bit too much for me. This is a little more than I bargained for. And so I wonder how many times people leave chiropractic practices because they got like more than they expected or something. Anyway, it's just an example of, we don't know why people leave. People make choices all the time. And I got to tell you that I've made a bunch of choices that were not so great. I've chosen not to do things that were wonderful. So I think people, sometimes do that too. Anyway.
Well, I had one that actually, I don't know if this is okay to share on a podcast or not, but I am.
I think you're going to do it anyway.
My podcast, so I can say where I had one who told me after a handful of adjustments, they had their first orgasm. They had never had an orgasm before, and so they were very happy for their care. And
I would assume they didn't stop care.
No, they didn't stop care.
No, I would.
So, and what you tell me a little bit about what message is the primary message that you would like chiropractors, chiropractic students to hear from you?
Probably the main thing that's on my mind right now is to remember that you have an innate intelligence too. We talk a lot about innate. I call it innate. That's how Sigafoose pronounced it. And, we rely on that for our care. We rely on that to not, really care what people come in with. We rely on that in our communication. And yet I think we forget that we have one too. And so therefore we are bigger than we think. We are more than enough. That's my favorite word that I made up. We have everything within us to not only be tremendous chiropractors, but to live a life of joy and service and fulfillment. And it's not what we don't know that gets us in trouble. It's what we know for sure that just ain't so. So my path was unlearning a lot of these things I knew for sure that just weren't so. Like, I suck. Can you say that on a podcast? Like I don't deserve, like I fear responsibility, or all these crazy things that were definitely not true, but at some point I became convinced about it. And those were the only things that were holding me back. It wasn't the fact that I didn't have it in me, because if we have an innate intelligence, then we have it in us. It's pretty simple. But it's about recognizing that, and then about being honest and self-reflective and having some tools to get over ourselves, to remove interference so we can be great and we can be big. And maybe that's the most important thing for us to do if we really want chiropractic to assume its rightful place in the world. It's not going to do that without each and every one of us overcoming some of these things we know for sure that just ain't so about ourselves. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard many people say this, and I'm thinking you may agree, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to hear your insight on it. I find that so much so, chiropractic practice is the ultimate mirror, the ultimate crucible for your growth. I don't know if ultimate, but a very good crucible for your growth, and that you will grow to the level of what you can gain from practicing. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's the reason why the question's been asked often in chiropractic, why did two guys or two ladies or whatever it is graduate from the same school and open up in the same town? and have, pretty much the same technique or whatever, or maybe do different techniques, and one, succeeds or whatever your definition of that is, and the other doesn't. And yeah, I think our practice is always going to be a direct reflection, a direct mirror of who we are and our growth. And
right.
And because of that, I didn't see growth like this through my career. I would go on a Panama mission, and all of a sudden, it would be a quantum leap.
Right.
It's quantum leaps kind of based on quantum leaps in my consciousness or in my vision or
Right.
in my ability to see possibilities. I mean, the mission trips were great for that.
Right.
So as we open up, because I really think energetically, a lot of us are pushing people away, even though we would never admit to that.
Oh, absolutely. We might be chasing them away.
Or just like overcomplicating things and talking people out of it. It's just another form of chasing them away, I guess. So it's sad when people, say they want big practices, and yet, they still have these, as Sigafoose would say, these high walls and chains and guard dogs and moats, metaphorically around their practice, around themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know that because I went through that. I had vicious guard dogs.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And simplify and making things easier. That was a lesson I learned, and it was hard to do. And I actually find myself having to relearn it often, which is that it's not about doing more and making things more complex. It's making it simpler. And so that you can release the healer within you versus that you've got guard dogs. What do you miss most about practicing?
Mostly the babies, adjusting the babies. And I mean, honestly, just loving up on a lot of people and being loved up by a lot of people. I miss that, especially this last year and a half. I have missed being in practice more this last year and a half than I have in the combined 10 years before that. Mm-hmm. When stuff was happening in the world, it always felt good to be in practice because it was always easy to know I was doing so. I was making a difference. I was doing enough. And that's been a bit of a challenge through this lag. I mean, I don't know if we ever could be doing enough, right. But it's been a little harder for me not being in practice. And I know it's true that through mentoring chiropractors, I'm still having an effect. But I miss having something, to go to every day and be a rebel and make a stand in that way, because it's harder when I'm home. Anyway, that's probably the main thing I miss about being in practice.
I'll tell you something. As you know, my stepdad is a chiropractor, and he was in our office getting checked a few weeks back, and I guess he heard the conversations going on, and he's been out of practice for a long time, and he looked up, and I've heard him say this before, but it was very surreal hearing it when he was on the table. He looked up and he said, what I miss most from practice is the ongoing relationships and the connection and seeing people's growth. And then he put his head back down,
I should have let him answer the question. That was a much better answer than mine.
Well, I don't know about that, but there's something about those relationships that really become deep relationships. What do you feel like you've learned since being out of practice?
I think I have learned to value the adjustment more than even when I was in practice, because I went into ministry. I went into what's called a New Thought ministry, Unity. I don't know if people are familiar with Unity. The principles of it's more of a spiritual movement than a religious movement, but I was attracted to it because the principles to me are exactly chiropractic. And so it was kind of an easy transition for me right around the time that my body was talking to me a lot. I never expected to stop adjusting, but anyway, you never know what's going to happen next. So for 12 years, I ran a spiritual ministry that was based on the principles of chiropractic to me. So I thought I was going to be addressing the cause more.
Wow.
I've always felt the cause was more in consciousness. But I got to tell you that within a very short period of time, and for the entire 12 years that my wife and I were co-ministers, we didn't see the kind of changes in people that we saw in our chiropractic practice. Not even close. I mean, a lot of people grasped onto principles. It was fun to preach to the choir more. But, in our experience, and I don't want to sound judgmental, but people didn't really take it and make it their life. They didn't make choices based on it. It was more about fellowship and being entertained, and we had a great music team, and I don't know what it was, but so through that, and I actually was at a chiropractic workshop I was teaching and having dinner, and I mentioned this to somebody, and he looked at me and he said, "Because they're not getting adjusted."
Right.
And I said, duh. And for some reason, that really hadn't occurred to me before, amazingly enough. I guess it was part of my transition, was to sort of, I don't know, as human beings do, when they move away from something, it becomes not as good as it was. You know what I mean? Like anyway, weirdly, I didn't think of that. And then, that was glaringly obvious. So, so folks, keep adjusting. That's one thing I've learned about chiropractic. And I think the other thing I've learned is what I already told you, that we have a lot of things to overcome. I mean, I knew this before, but having some distance and some objectivity and speaking to a lot of chiropractors still, I think our self-worth has even decreased, if possible. I think we're walking around still with a lot of things we know for sure that just ain't so, and they're really holding us back as a profession still.
The art of chiropractic, as you know, this year at Mile High, we're focusing on the art of chiropractic. For someone who's practiced, 2 decades, can you speak a little bit to the art of the adjustment versus what a manipulation is? Those lines are getting more and more blurred in our educational process, and also in YouTube videos. Can you speak a little bit about that to help chiropractors and chiropractic students that might watch this?
Well, what I said earlier, I think is a great way to differentiate between a manipulation. A manipulation is something done to somebody to make them conform to some preconceived idea of how they're supposed to be.
Right.
That is 180 degrees opposite of what an adjustment is. To me, an adjustment is something, again, you do with somebody to remove interference without any idea of any pre-existing idea of what they're supposed to be, because we don't know how they're supposed to be, but In8 knows how they're supposed to be, and our job becomes to just free that up. It's night and day, and so that obviously changes the art, because if I'm doing it with somebody, then I have to be sort of receptive to to how they are and how open they are, and when they will let me in and all this kind of stuff. If it's just manipulation, it would probably be good for me to be sensitive about when they're relaxed. But other than that, it's not a team effort. It's not an act of love to me. It's right. So art and love to me are very linked, because we're obviously going to be better artists if we're in love with our art. Right.
And so important thing, I've heard this a number of times said a couple different ways by different presenters over the years. And I think you may have heard this too, or maybe it'll be new to you. I've heard people say there's the pain relief or musculoskeletal level of practice, or place headspace of the practitioner. And then there's a correction level of practice or headspace, right? And then that there's a spirit or soul level or headspace or being space of practice. Have you ever heard that before?
I've heard a few other steps in there. I mean, I've heard 4 steps, 5 steps. There's a neurological one in there somewhere. I think
Yeah.
I think there's value in that, as long as, we don't use it to either beat ourselves up or judge other chiropractors, which
And I think
unfortunately.
that has a lot to do with the art of chiropractic. Where does love fit into that and the art of chiropractic?
Yeah, well, it fits in. Well, it doesn't fit in. It's one. It's
Okay.
it's and again, I keep going back to doing something to somebody rather than doing something with somebody. It's a dance. It's a dance we do together. It's
Right.
So there's giving and receiving going on
Uh-huh.
with both parties. That's the difference, I think, in an
Right.
act of love. I think that's where love comes in. And I think this is really important, even though it may sound airy fairy, and I am from California, so deal with it. And plus, I'm probably one of the only presenters who lives at a higher altitude than Mile High. So,
Ah.
there's not much oxygen around here, so you might have to excuse me. But a lot of chiropractors burn out because they don't receive,
Yes.
or they just block, or they only look to receive through money or through referrals. But there's so much love being exchanged on a day-to-day basis in a chiropractic office. This is what's gotten me through the last year and a half, just hearing from my clients about this, about
Right.
people just being so grateful for having a place to go and a place of hope and a place of light, a safe haven in the storm. And so many
Yes.
people who were,
Yes.
in England, who were locked down for months, and the first place they go when they can go somewhere is the chiropractic. I mean, to go back to the other question, I miss some of this stuff
Right.
from being in practice. So love has everything to do with it. I mean, and that's a big one. That is really a big one, because if we can learn, and this is something that I worked on learning through my whole career, if we can really see it as an act of love and give and realize that all the love there is has been given and received in that one moment of the adjustment, then I don't need anything else. I don't need them to like me. I don't need them to, I would like them to refer to me, but I don't need that. I don't need any later receiving.
Right.
This is probably what allowed me to do the box on the wall and actually be able to eat for those
Right.
12 years.
Right.
Was the fact that I was just giving my gift, and the receiving was happening in that moment. This is what I learned in Panama, where I wasn't getting paid, so I had to learn to receive something. It wasn't very hard at all, because all day long you're just looking at In8 walking in different earth suits with beautiful black eyes, and just watching those eyes light up time after time after time. I mean, I've never received so much in my life. When people would
Right.
give us a blessing, or they'd give us some food, or they'd chip in the whole community to get us a lottery ticket. I mean, the love was so thick. But I think it's there in all of our offices too, if we just open up to it and even welcome it. Like, give people opportunities to give back love, whether that's through referrals or through testimonials or through whatever. They'll figure it out. Christmas time, man, I used to like have to rent a U-Haul to get all the crap people would, the food that people would make and bring in. As Sigafoose used to say, because he told the same story, he said, "Do I have a sign on my back that says I'm hungry?"
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So yeah, love has everything to do with it. And
Right.
if we're in a space of love, meaning a space of oneness with the person we're adjusting, because I have said for years, I believe the key to practice everything is
Right.
where we are in that moment, that one moment of interaction with the
Yes.
patient.
Yes.
And I think
Absolutely.
we do better when it's love and not like, oh, I need this person, or is this person going to pay me, or this person doesn't get it because they missed an appointment,
Right.
or so many
Yeah.
other places we go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it blocks the magic, or it limits the magic, or obscures it, clouds it.
And I think it's also a reason people leave. I think
Yes.
people leave when they don't feel like in balance, that they're just receiving, and they don't feel they're paying enough for what they're receiving or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's really nice to open up to other ways to receive from people.
And what are you excited to share about at Mile High?
Well, I probably said everything I was going to say, so I'm going to have to figure out because this podcast is longer than my talk, I think. It's going to be something along these lines. It's lately I've been, what's alive in me is the sixth principle of chiropractic. I'm not a big principles guy.
Okay.
I probably couldn't tell you more than 2 or 3 of them by rote. But the sixth one has always intrigued me. That's there is no process that does not require time.
Right.
So I may end up talking about that because, the key thing to me, I realized, is that he didn't say how much time, right? So, and I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about this or not, but I'm talking about it now. But what I've observed in my life is sometimes, you're working on something and you're working on something for years, and maybe you hold an intention or a vision for years, and all of a sudden it manifests like this. Right. And so, so our job was maybe just to hold the vision, to work on ourselves, to work on the process. We're not in charge of how much time it's going to take to manifest, because it's always unpredictable, and it's usually magical. Like Dick Santo used to ask us, how long does it take water to boil? And the answer is like this. Okay, the variable is how much heat you apply, right? So if it's a great metaphor, because people are holding these visions for a big practice or for whatever their goal is. And we get so stuck on like when and how and what's it supposed to look like. Our job is to just keep the flame under the pot. If we keep the flame under the pot, it's going to boil, right? But if we hold a lighter under the pot, and every now and then, so, well, this is not working, so let me try something else, or let me.
Also refining. Under heat you get refined, right?
Absolutely. It's a great metaphor. Maybe we'll do a co-talk on
it. Well, here's the thing. When you talk about the principle of time, there's certainly a lot, as we're focusing on the art of chiropractic. There's certainly a lot that could be said about that, and the healing process and the art. Dan,
you obviously have observed patients who maybe didn't seem to be getting too much or whatever, or they were not reaching what they hoped their goals were. And then after years, something magical happens, or some incredible healing unfolds. I'm sure you've seen that, right?
Absolutely.
Which is a very wonderful reason for long-term care. I mean, I have hundreds of stories. I mean, people who maybe got great results with something, but stuck with it, and then, something they never expected, or something they didn't even tell me about because they didn't think I could help them with, or something would happen magically. So this principle shows up all the time. That time's a weird thing.
And I've seen people, this whole joke about maximal medical improvement that you see in the chiropractic profession. I've seen that year after year. I don't know if you know this about me. I'm very focused on having outcome assessments. Some people are, some aren't. I'm very focused on the care and having outcome measures during care. I've seen over and over again, people have better changes in their second year, third year, fifth year, 10th year than they had in their first, 24 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever. And it always amazes me.
It's pretty cool. Yes. Yeah. I was just thinking that I remember getting patients who had been to other chiropractors, or they've done therapies, or they tried everything for years, and they get one adjustment and it's like, a miracle.
Right.
And I think sometimes we sort of like forget about everything they've been doing up to that point, because it's worked the other way for me too. I've worked on people for years, and they go to one yoga class and they come back and tell me, oh, took care of my problem. And so, we're going to get both ends of that. But it's, again, I think that's reflective of this principle and how time.
Yes.
How the fruit of the process sometimes can appear instantly or unexpectedly.
Yep. And I've had that too. It's like, oh, I got an acupuncture session. And,
yeah, right.
It's okay. Well, I don't know that helped the organization of your nerve system, but let's get you on the table because that's what we're doing. So, um, but I'm really grateful that I'm really grateful to get this time to connect with you. I look forward to us having more time to connect at other locations. I feel like this is the beginning of us having more of a relationship and do more in chiropractic. And I also am excited to have you on stage at Mile High, and excited to see everybody there. It's going to be it's going to be a great experience after the way the world has been the last year and a half, 2 years, to be in camaraderie and community. I'm often, I hear more feedback. Don't take this personally. I hear more feedback about that experience of Mile High than the speakers. So, the community.
I'm under no illusions. At Parker, that's what we used to say. We got the best thing we got all weekend was in the hallway.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I get it. And this is going to be huge. I had a small gathering at the end of April, and I can't tell you how much it did for my soul just to get together with 25 people. I can't imagine how. I won't even need a plane to get home.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you for being there. Thank you for sharing, serving humanity, serving chiropractors, serving chiropractic students, and giving your heart and soul in service to people. And also thank everyone for enjoying the Mile High podcast. And make sure you hit subscribe, and make sure you rise up to Mile High altitude in September. We look forward to seeing you in September. Keep changing spines, lives, and minds with chiropractic.